Over the years, Arthur has given a number of drawings and photographs and a couple of models to the CMU Architecture Archives under the care of Martin Arend. And Martin said to me at one point, Arthur has really given us some very wonderful and provocative material over the years, and we should take a look at it, we should collect it all together and think about putting on an exhibition of this work. I wrote a proposal for the Heinz Architectural Center and Ray Ryan, and people in the museum looked at that and reviewed it and said,
Art Lubetz is, to my eye, clearly one of the most interesting architects in Pittsburgh. And we were very interested and excited about the possibility of doing a monographic show with art. We don't do many monographic shows, but we felt this was a special occasion, his 50th anniversary in practice. So we thought, let's do this exhibition.
Arthur's really unique among Pittsburgh architects. There are other people who do things that are thoughtful and sophisticated, and yet among them, Arthur is the person who seeks out controversy, who is always very charged with intellectual controversy and ideas, and who really puts himself out there as a thinker as well as a builder.
When I asked him to get involved in creating a new residence for me, and I think his first thing was, well, yeah, maybe I can do something, but you have to let me sock it to the neighborhood. So I had no objection to that. I said, go right ahead. But he said, we're going to put a fire engine red wall through the house. And I said, okay. And it just went, from there.
Yeah, the house in Squirrel Hill where the red wedge goes through there. Even though physically it's a very sculptural statement, what most people don't know because they're not inside the house is how that beautiful volume of the 3 stories is opened up next to that red wall, and how the stair, which took a lot of time to work out, winds around that red wall, interacting with that on every floor.
But some neighbors, there was one neighbor who actually said to me, this is disgusting, because the red wall was something that no one could comprehend, and many didn't really even want to know. They just didn't like it. I haven't had anybody come in and say, I don't like it still. On the contrary, people would come in and say, oh, now I see the wall. Anyone who comes in likes it, especially kids. I have to say, during Halloween, when kids would come in, first thing before they even ask for candy, they say, wow, this is cool. So I trust kids too.
What also happens, though, is that as you look at these things in greater detail, as you study some of their subtleties, and as you experience them walking through and looking at them on the street, you realize that they are very sophisticated. They are engaged with current architectural culture. They have refinements and subtleties of all kinds. So the big moves are there. The grab your attention, slicing and colliding is there. But so are the things that are more for the specialist and more for the person who cares a lot about architecture, even as they work for people who are just being introduced to architecture as well.
Many of these projects, of course, there are some of them from the 80s, some of them much more recently, are, on the one hand, yes, they're very much art. You can see he has a certain signature, perhaps. But also they are in sync with many of the bigger themes in architectural culture, whether that's deconstruction, whether that's typology. Many of these concerns are evident in his work. So I'm interested in this reality, not just an idea, but also a reality that here's an architect in Pittsburgh doing work that is of its place, but also part of a bigger architectural culture.
The continuing influence of art on Arthur's architecture is always an important thing. He studies and reads and visits and considers the work and writings of people in the fields of visual arts. And it's part of that sense that architecture is a kind of visual art. It's aesthetic, it's philosophical, it's something that you respond to viscerally, and that continues to pervade the work.
When the average citizen thinks about an architect, he thinks about somebody that's 80% engineer and 20% let's make it look pretty good. Art is the polar opposite of that. He is 80% artistry. And when it comes to the practical stuff, he doesn't have a lot of feeling about that, but he knows that about himself. So he goes out and he hires structural engineers, heating engineers, sub-engineers to fill out that side so that he can keep himself free to focus on the artistry. And this is a wonderful trait about him because he really punches out stuff that looks good as a result of that. It is highly a work of art. I feel that it's been, whatever that is now, 33 years or something like that. I'm still in love with the house. It still has, and this is not an exaggerated term, it still has a spiritual effect on me. Lesser words don't describe what it's like.
Architecture is not just a building. It's an experience, a statement, philosophy, a way of life, time, and color. So all of those things can be part of our daily routine, We can be getting up in the morning and seeing more than just the four walls of the bedroom, and knowing that we are in a space that goes just beyond the functional. And I think it's functional, yes, it has to be comfortable, but it's at the same time elevating. So in a way, architecture to me is like art.
When you have an office that consistently does artistic and challenging and exciting work, that means that young people especially take an interest in it. They want to work there. People in school or just out of school who are filled with ideas find this an attractive place to work and to practice architecture. And Arthur, as somebody in practice for 50 years, still has that energy and still has that curiosity about architecture and what can it be that attracts young people.
He encouraged us to read, and he encouraged us to think. And he had us all reading people that I'd never heard about. I just remember having Hannah Arendt assigned to me, and being someone that was really interested in punk ideals and other things, and not having a philosophy background, it gave substance to the naivete and passion that a lot of my fellow, my peers had. And we could now have the reasons to talk about what we felt.
Arthur has somehow found a way to maintain that level of enthusiasm consistently. Not only for the work overall, but for his engagement with young people and drawing the best from them and learning from them just as he teaches from them. And I think it's something that's really kind of marked his practice from the first days up through the present time. That's a long run to be that enthusiastic, that engaged, and that interested in the work. And it's been his hallmark.
As a young architect, I moved here. I would attend all of the Carnegie Mellon lecture series when architects would come into the school and give talks on their work and their outlook. And I noticed there was one gentleman who was always there and basically was a sea of students. And I was like, well, who's that guy? And it was Art Lubetz. And he was the only professional to attend those lectures. And this sort of light bulb goes on, why is he the only one? So I found myself sort of nudging up to him, walking out of these lectures and introducing myself. After a while, I started to look around at the work he did in Pittsburgh, especially in the East End, Shady Side, Squirrel Hill. And I thought, this is where I want to be. So I approached him after one of those lectures and said, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I want to work for you. He was like, who are you again? And I did that enough times where ultimately he said yes.
Maybe in every single decade that he's been in practice, Arthur has been a person that you would want to encounter if you're interested in architecture in Pittsburgh. oh, you got to go talk to Arthur Lubetz. He's somebody who is doing these interesting things. He's somebody who talks about these great ideas. It's also the case that he's a Pittsburgher, and he went to high school at Taylor Alderdice with my mom, as well as some of these other figures, Mel Bachner, from the world of art. He's a contemporary of Edgar Snyder, the lawyer whom you see on TV. He's a Pittsburgh character of his very own singular kind. If I had not had the personal connection to him through family, I certainly would have been dying to know who's the guy who designed this building on North Craig Street or on Dalzell Place or on College Avenue in Shadyside, all these places through town.
Soon after I first got to Pittsburgh, which is now 13 or 14 years ago, I spotted the building on Craig Street just up the road, which is Art's office. The language of the building is, I think, in sync with many of the themes of that period, but it still feels fresh to me. And when you visit Art's studio, there's something maybe of that quality about being this spatially complex project with many, many things to see. And then I was even more delighted to discover that it was in fact a renovation of an existing building, which speaks to, again, a kind of pragmatism, perhaps, which may be a very Pittsburgh trait, about working with what's available, what exists, and making something inventive and unprecedented even from that.
It was always a great opportunity to go to his office and be able to look through drawings, see the projects that were on the boards, look at the models in the office. It's a great building. The light and the color. It's always seemed like a great place to work. It was certainly a great place to visit.
It's important for every city, every architectural community, to have leaders and to have people that make provocative projects, even if you don't like everything that the architect has ever done, even if you don't agree with everything the architect says, they're willing to put themselves out there as a cultural beacon, so that we can discuss some of these issues in a more informed and animated way.
It's really great to have Art Lubetz be appreciated finally to the scale of all the work that he's done. But it's so great to have him celebrated this way.
There's a way in which Arthur is very much a Pittsburgh figure because of how he fits in the landscape with these buildings and because they're raw and always coming into their own, which is suitable to the city. But he's engaged with ideas from all over, and that makes him a Pittsburgh architect, yes, but something beyond that as well.